Hello everyone, our story for this episode begins in the early hours of Saturday, May 20th, 1989. Alexander Mikhailovich Zuyev was a captain in the Soviet Air Force based at Gwadata on the Black Sea coast. To an outsider it may have seemed that Alexander had everything to look forward to. He was married to the daughter of a chief of staff and was a captain in a frontline unit operating the MiG-29. Welcome to Curious Aviation Tales. The origins of our tale begin not on the taxiways of Gwadata but in the preceding years. Alexander had recently failed selection for a prestigious position at Akhtubinsk Test Pilot School. As a result of this, he had become extremely disillusioned and his marriage had got into trouble because I'm told nobody likes the taste of bitter, resentful cock. It has been speculated that Alexander's disillusionment led to a downturn in his performance, which in turn led to increasing conflict with superiors. It's probably at this point that Alexander felt the only course of action left open to him was defection, so he began to formulate a plan. On the evening of Friday the 19th of May, he arrived at the base in jubilant mood. He joyfully announced that his wife had a balloon over her toy shop and was expecting a son. Eager to congratulate him on his impending cum-sprout, his colleagues each accepted a slice of the cake he had brought. As regular viewers of the series will have discerned, this was no ordinary cake. He had made the cake himself, lacing the mix with sleeping pills. It was in fact a Cosby cake. All but 4 of the base personnel on duty had consumed the Cosby cake and were quickly rendered unconscious. As soon as everyone was happily dreaming of perestroika, Alexander cut the telephone lines to the base. For the next phase of his plan, he waited till well after shift change. You see, 2 of the people who had not taken part in this celebration were mechanics who were busily making the MiG-29s which had recently come out of storage flight-worthy. The mechanics also doubled as armed security for the aircraft because late Soviet Union. One of the mechanics, thoroughly pissed off, returned to the mess hall to find out what happened to the relief shift. Alexander then approached the second mechanic and offered to relieve him. Not being that horny, the mechanic declined, but said he could take over his shift, handed Alexander the rifle and went off home. Alexander hurriedly began his pre-flight checks, but unfortunately for him there was an interruption. The first mechanic, who previously went to check on the relief shift, had discovered what happened. I'd like to think that Alexander had made it look like his colleagues had gotten drunk and had an orgy, so when the mechanic returned to the mess hall he was faced with a scene of empty vodka bottles, unravelled condoms and hairy bare arses staring out from around every corner. But I don't think that was the case. When the mechanic returned, now feeling angry, pissed off and betrayed, Alexander tried to convince him to relinquish his weapon. A brief gunfight ensued and both were wounded, Alexander sustaining a wound to his right arm. Taking off must have been a moment of sheer relief for Alexander, but I'm sure he hardly dared to feel anything, as he still had to enact the penultimate part of his plan. With external communications cut, he knew his colleagues remained the greatest threat to his plans. As the base commander had been busy drawing up flight plans for the next day, he had also missed out on the congratulations on your cum-sprout Cosby cake. Knowing the more experienced commander could put a sudden end to his plans, Zuyev circled round to line up the parked aircraft for a strafing run. When he squeezed his trigger, nothing happened. You see, when the aircraft were placed in storage, 2 locks were placed on the guns. Alexander had only disabled one during his abortive pre-flight. By now realising his error, he turned south along the Black Sea coast, racing for Turkish airspace. He still had around 100 kilometres of Soviet airspace to cross. A brief while later, Zuyev landed his MiG-29 at Trabzon airport in northern Turkey. His first words upon landing were reported to be, "Finally, an American." At that time of perestroika, glasnost and the end of the Cold War looming, Turkey, anxious to forge a more productive relationship with what was to become the former Soviet Union, arrested Zuyev for hijacking the aircraft. Interestingly, later that day a Soviet team were refused permission to land at Trabzon and had to return the following day to recover their aircraft. The charges against Zuyev were dropped and he emigrated to the United States. I would like to say that's where our story ends, however there is one unfortunate final footnote. Just over 12 years later, on June 10th, 2001, Alexander Zuyev and Jerry Warren, another pilot, were flying a Yak-52 near Bellingham in Washington. The aircraft entered an uncontrollable stall and crashed, killing both, proving the old saying, in Soviet Russia, the Yak-52 flies you.